Hey everybody, here are the last two examples from class Q on simplifying the difference quotient. So here's our function f of x equal to 3 over x. As an FYI, f of x plus h would be 3 over whatever, which is going to be x plus h. And so when I calculate f of x plus h minus f of x all over h, I'm just going to write those in. So f of x plus h is literally just 3 over x plus h. I don't actually need those parentheses. Minus f of x, which is 3 over x. And I don't need parentheses here because I don't have to distribute the minus sign, right? It's just minus this one quantity. We definitely don't distribute it to the top and the bottom because that'd be like multiplying by -1 over -1, which is actually +1. What we do need is a common denominator. Grab a pen over here. So I'm going to multiply this part here by x over x, and multiply this part here by x plus h over x plus h. And this is pretty common when your function is some sort of rational function. You typically have to subtract the top parts together by getting a common denominator. So I'm going to rewrite this as, let's write it down here, 3x over x times x plus h minus 3 times x plus h over x times x plus h. And instead of, no, let's still say it's all divided by h. But now in the next step, we're going to combine these two fractions together because they have a common denominator now. So I'm going to write this as 3x minus 3 times x plus h. I should have distributed the minus 3. Oh, well, I didn't. Over x times x plus h. Instead of dividing by h, which is really h over 1, right? Anything on its own is just the same thing divided by 1. Dividing by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. So now, rewriting this, look what I've got. I've got 3x, I'm going to distribute the minus 3 and get a minus 3x and a minus 3h all over x times x plus h times h. Just as a reminder, this h here that started out in the denominator, that's the h that we want to make sure cancels out. So then the 3x's cancel, 3x minus 3x, those cancel out. I'm left with a negative 3h divided by x times x plus h times h. H divided by h does cancel out. And so we're left with negative 3 over x times x plus h, which is probably how you should actually leave this. You could distribute the x, but it's really not in your interest to do so because what you're going to see in future classes is we're going to let this h become 0. So multiplying this out doesn't really benefit you. You're going to eventually, not in this class, but eventually you're going to let this remaining h become 0, and your final answer is going to be negative 3 over x squared. But that's neither here nor there. So don't bother multiplying it out for now or ever. All right, let's look at this other one here. Sorry, a little frog in my throat there. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to find f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. I'll remind you all that f of x equal to the square root of 5x plus 1 is the f of x plus h is the square root of 5 times x plus h plus 1. Okay, so first step, we're just going to write square root. I'm going to simplify this a tiny bit. I'm going to write it as 5x plus 5h plus 1 minus the square root of 5x plus 1 divided by h. There's a technique for dealing with square roots. The technique is to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate. The conjugate of something is just the same something with the opposite sign connecting them. So if you have, for example, very generally, if you have a plus b, the conjugate is a minus b. That's it. And vice versa. If you have a minus b, the conjugate is a plus b. So if you want to figure out how to deal with this, you're going to multiply it by, it's kind of a little unwieldy. The conjugate, which is the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 plus the square root of 5x plus 1 over the same thing. Sorry, that's a little bit tight in there. Okay. So why would you multiply by the conjugate? Well, nice things happen when you multiply the conjugate. So the denominator is going to just stay as h times all that stuff. It's going to be h times the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 plus the square root of 5x plus 1. But on top, we're going to FOIL it out. Now, the shortcut here is that when you multiply something by its conjugate, you get the first thing squared minus the second thing squared. In fact, let me just show you all. If I multiply a plus b by its conjugate, a minus b, you get a squared. You get a times negative b. You get b times a. And you get b times negative b. But the negative ab and the positive ab cancel out. And you get a squared minus b squared. That works here too. The square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 times the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 is just the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 squared, which normally you would just say is 5x plus 5h plus 1. And then the middle terms are going to cancel. It's going to be this times this, which I'm going to write out. So it's going to be plus. You shouldn't write this out when you're doing this on your own. It's not worth your time. Everyone believes you if you say they cancel. But it's going to be the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 times the square root of 5x plus 1. So that's that times that. And then I'm going to do this times this, which is minus the square root of 5x plus 1 times the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1. Let me zoom in a tiny bit so I can see that a little bit better. Sorry, I know that's a little bit easier to see what's happening there. And finally, this is getting very long. It's going to be minus this times plus this. So it's going to be minus overall because the minus is a positive is minus. Square root of 5x plus 1 times the square root of 5x plus 1. Which is the square root of 5x plus 1 squared. Notice it's squared first and then the minus after. So it is going to end up being a negative overall. So let's simplify here. Square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 squared is just 5x plus 5h plus 1. And then this term here and this term here are the same but opposite, so they cancel out. You don't have to show that. You can just jump straight to saying, oh, it's the first thing squared minus the second thing squared. So it's going to be minus 5x plus 1. Notice I still have to distribute the minus sign. The denominator, so the things that are conjugates, you definitely want to multiply out. The things that are not conjugates, the h and all this other stuff here, you just want to leave as h times all that because we're looking to cancel that h out. So we still have the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 plus the square root of 5x plus 1. Okay, distribute the minus sign. You get 5x plus 5h plus 1 minus 5x minus 1 over the same denominator. Not surprisingly, the not h terms, 5x and negative 5x, 1 and negative 1 cancel out. And you're left with a 5h over h times all that stuff. You could probably skip the step I'm writing here and just say, well, look, James, I know that those h's cancel. So this h cancels with that h, and we're left with a final answer of 5 divided by the square root of 5x plus 5h plus 1 plus the square root of 5x plus 1. And there's no way of simplifying that further. That's our final answer. So that's a couple examples of how to simplify the difference quotient. Yeah, hopefully this is helpful. I will see you guys in class on Friday.